be present to the joy, to the miracles, to the power to choose.
I'd like to welcome to the show Charles Eisenstein. How you doing, Charles?
Hey, Alex. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being on the show, my friend. I truly appreciate it. I'm a fan of your work, man. You're doing God's work in many ways, helping society out. But my very first question to you, sir, is how did spirituality influence your work, and what was spirituality in your world in the first place, and how did it influence your work?
The word spirituality is really loaded, and it can
Hi kids! Today I will share with you a few tips about fluent arpeggio playing. There are tons of videos on this topic and there are some really great ones. But, and that's incredible actually, I have understood that I still might be able to share my own way of efficient playing that is slightly or very much different of what I've seen before. The main drama about all this arpeggio thing happens between the thumb and the wrist. Now, a very small insight from my teaching experience. Most of issues with arpeggios come from the fact that most of people try to connect notes literally while changing the hand position. For example, if you would play something like that, you'd notice a huge amount of tension in your thumb when you change the hand position. It's a very wide distance and the thumb gets really tense. In order to release it, you'd most probably start some upside down movement with your wrist, something like. That's a good plan in general. If you play slowly, if you have to provide a perfect legato, and if you can't use the pedal for some reason. But in a faster tempo, it doesn't work as well. So what do we do then? The thing is that when I play arpeggios in a really fluent tempo, I'm not connecting those hand positions with fingers. And what's about legato, you might ask? And that's a very good question, and we will speak about that a bit later. But before, I would like to share with you two basic techniques how to practice arpeggios for tension-free fluent playing. First technique involves a wrist rotation. You may rotate your wrist to the right, for example, you hit the note with your thumb. Your wrist goes to the left at first, yes? Like that. And then you start rotating it clockwise to the right. So it's like left, and then I go to the right. And then you just move your hand, and so on. So then you would have something like. It's a great way of learning, physiologically very comfortable and super safe. Especially it works fantastically with some wider structures like Chopin's C minor etude. I know all bloggers give that example, but it's really one of the best examples for this type of technique. So at first, I rotate my wrist to the left, as you see, and then just rotate it back to the right. So. Important that your thumb remains very much released. So when I play, I approach the fifth finger and my thumb absolutely relaxed. He just approaches the next position in a very relaxed way. And of course, when you play some arpeggio with your left hand, the movement would be mirrored. Yeah, so I rotate my wrist to the left and then so. However, for me personally, in many situations, this is not the best way of playing, because the risk of the notes accented by accident is huge. Because as you might see with the wrist rotation, I rotate my wrist and my thumb is very high from the keyboard, and it falls then from a significant height. And the finger itself is very heavy and very strong. The thumb actually is nearly as strong as all the other fingers. So there's a real risk that you might sound like. The second way that I personally prefer in most of situations is kind of a hybrid between that incorrect technique that I explained in the beginning, and this one with the wrist rotation that is physiologically correct, but musically challenging in some situations. What I'm doing while playing arpeggios, so I still fold my thumb. You see, it goes underneath as soon as it is done, but not too much, but only to that extent when it doesn't escalate the tension. Because as you might see, we may fold our thumb a bit, let's say to the third finger, more or less, without increasing much tension. Problems start later. If we try to reach the fourth or the fifth finger, then we become really tense here. So I bend my thumb a little bit, like approximately till the third finger. I bend it only till that extent when I feel that I might get tension if I go further with it. I also rotate my wrist horizontally a little bit, just a tiny bit, simultaneously with bending my thumb. So as you see, I rotated my wrist just a little bit, like maybe 3 or 5 degrees maximum, not too much, of course. And I fold my thumb. And then I release the third finger and kind of fly over the rest of the distance. So it would be like. In this case, there is a much smaller chance of a harsh accent and kind of fly over the rest of the distance.
A lot of people take it to mean something that's outside of the physical realm, outside of the scientific realm. But I see it more as that which the scientific and physical modes of sensing have not yet acknowledged. So it's not like some separate reality from scientific reality, but it's the things that we do not yet know how to measure, or maybe that cannot be measured. In fact, I think that's ultimately where I would define spirituality. It's everything that's qualitative and everything that escapes reduction. And so as far as like how my work and my life has been influenced by that, I guess it goes back, I at university, I studied mathematics and philosophy. I was pretty much, at least superficially, a firm believer in science and in the scientific project to encompass all knowledge within its domain. But I had a secret doubt, a dissatisfaction with that, which probably opened me to take seriously the experiences that I had following that showed me directly that there is a lot to reality that I had not learned in university and that had been banished into unreality by the paradigms and belief systems that I had been indoctrinated into. So, so for me, like spirituality is, I guess, it's to acknowledge and investigate and explore those things that are beyond what our society holds as real. And secondly, the realization that these excluded areas of knowledge and being go all the way to the root of what it is to be human, what it is to exist in the world. They're not just like some curiosity out there, but they're core to who we are, and therefore to living a meaningful and happy life.
Well, let me ask you then, why are people so afraid in today's, especially the Western society, are so afraid to even have open conversations about spirituality or these deeper mysteries that they, many times, you're right, look at oddities or phenomenon or things like that like, oh, well, that's just that. Or, oh, my grandmother saw grandpa die, met her at the bed. These kind of things that are kind of phenomenons. Why are they afraid to talk about it publicly more and more? And you're right, the word spirituality, you can't even say the word God. God is super loaded, unfortunately, and now we have to call it the universe or the source, which I don't care, whatever you want to call it. But I remember, even when I was growing up, the word God was used very free, but now it's a loaded word. So I agree with you on the spirituality. But what is that? What's your opinion on that?
Some people are afraid to talk about it. Other people maybe talk about it too much.
Agreed.
I think the reasons are pretty obvious. Some of the reasons are obvious. You don't want people to think that you're weird. You don't want people to think you're impractical and unrealistic and maybe a little crazy, because in many societies, not just our own, excuse me, the very definition of insanity is to see and believe things that are not shared by everybody else.
Right.
Which could actually, in a more objective sense, mean that you're eminently sane for not participating in a collective delusion. But from the perspective of that society, you're mad. And no one wants to be seen as mad and be ostracized. And, historically, that could even be that you end up getting sacrificed by the mob.
Yeah, burned at the stake.
Yeah. So we have a very deep instinct not to violate the surrounding norms about what opinions it's okay to express, what you can believe, what experiences you can share. And so there's still some of that stigma around spiritual beliefs or spiritual experiences. And yeah, I think also there's an aspect of this, it's not just, people don't only keep quiet about it and keep quiet about their anomalous experiences because they're afraid of what other people will think. Mm-hmm. It's also, they're afraid of what they themselves will think.
Right.
It's uncomfortable to acknowledge a bigger reality than the one that is familiar and the one that is validated by the people around you. Because if you really take in, and I don't know what experiences you've had that you would qualify as spiritual or mystical. I've had a few, and many people have here actually, more than as you're saying, a lot more have had them than are acknowledging it. Mm-hmm. But they're uncomfortable because if you really take that experience in and say, yes, that happened, then you have to admit that reality is a lot bigger than the one you've been operating in. And then your life doesn't make sense anymore. Right. If we're all connected, if I am more than just this body and this being, if I'm connected to everything and to every person, then my life doesn't make sense anymore to compete and to control and to withhold from others. And it turns life inside out and upside down anytime that you take in a data point, an experience that doesn't fit the existing story.
And to go back to what we're saying in regards to the fear of the mob, the greatest fear we have from rankings that I've seen is like death is number 2, public speaking is number 1. And that concept of public speaking is to be ostracized by the audience, by the crowd, by the tribe, if you will. So there's a deep-seated, feeling to belong, because we needed to, in order to survive, we needed to be part of that tribe. But then the spirituality stuff and the phenomena we're talking about, you were saying that if you have any new data points, it just crushes the foundation. I've said this so many times on the show. It's like, if I was raised Catholic all my life and the concept of reincarnation gets introduced, if I take that data point and believe it, it destroys the foundation of what I've built my life upon. That's scary and it shakes the whole world up. So either 1, I accept it, 2, I ignore it, or 3, I fight against it, which is what what so many of the main problems of life is today in our society, correct?
You said one thing that I wanted to maybe expand on a little bit.
Please.
Compulsion to conform in our beliefs and perceptions is so powerful that people will literally deny what they actually saw with their own eyes, because it is this instinct that you're speaking of, to conform, to get along. It's a survival, and you named it as a survival instinct, but that's not necessarily because it helps the tribe or the band survive.
Right.
It is because this is something I've written about extensively, but this ancient pattern of sacrificial violence that affected pretty much all human societies and still does today, where you have social conflict, you have cycles of vengeance, you have blood feuds, societies coming apart. And the way that peace is found is that everybody turns on a victim, somebody or a subclass of victims who are dehumanized, ostracized, ritually murdered. And once that is accomplished, then peace and harmony reign again, because all of that bloodlust and that desire for vengeance and that desire to do something about this insult that has happened to me in this blood feud, that has been expiated, that has been resolved. Harmony reigns. So in times of stress, of social stress, social tension, it is imperative not to be identified as subhuman, as someone outside society, as a witch, as a Jew, as a heretic, as an anti-vaxxer,
as a Christian. As a Christian in the Roman times,
yeah, whatever it is, like this mob impulse is terrifying. It's such a deep instinct that, like, you see it in school, on the schoolyard, Like, nobody wants to be the kid with cooties. And if you touch the kid with cooties, then you have cooties too. Right. So no one will associate with him.
Why is this? Why is this so ingrained in our psyche as a species?
Because it's such an ancient pattern. I mean, it's the pattern of the sacrificial victim. Something has to be done. Let's go find somebody to blame it on. Let's go find somebody to kill. I mean, there's actually a lot of theology built around this, because the Christ story was, if it had fit the normal mythological template, then, here we have an unruly mob, we have social stress. Pontius Pilate, he knows what to do. You direct the mob's anger not at the authorities, not at other established factions of society. You direct it at a criminal, at a victim, at some, a heretic, at somebody. And so, he names Jesus as a heretic, puts him on the cross, and is hoping thereby that the mob will be satisfied that something has been done. Somebody has been killed. The problem has been solved. And normally that victim would be memorialized in myth as a villain, as an arch villain.
Right.
This is the storyline that we still find today in superhero movies and James Bond movies and stuff like that. You find the bad guy, you kill the bad guy, and all the problems are solved. but what the Christ story does is it turns that narrative on its head by establishing the innocence of the victim, the unimpeachable innocence of the victim, which then suggests that, in fact, anybody who has ever been sacrificed to the mob or subjected to even capital punishment, I mean, that's another example of ritual sacrifice. I mean, capital punishment is highly ritualized. Mm-hmm. You know, the blindfold, the last meal, the last walk, like all these kind of things.
Right.
So it suggests that anyone who has been subjected to ritual sacrifice is also innocent. And we've all had that experience where most of us have had, maybe when like the class bully points to you and everybody joins in and it's like, but I'm innocent. You know, even if you have done something wrong, you're innocent of what is imputed to you, which is that you are the cause of social tension. You are so anyway, I wrote extensively about this, and I'm not sure if we want to go, I don't know, I've already gone kind of deep into it, but
it's all good. It's all good.
So I guess what I'm saying is that the overthrow of this pattern, which is suggested by the Christ story, and not only by the Christ story, it's also like deeply in Buddhism as well, and Hinduism. But the idea that the origin of this pattern is our tendency to dehumanize each other, to stand in judgment of each other.
Right.
And once that is in place, once we have that tendency, we are easily manipulated by governments, by corporations, by demagogues, by the elites. All they have to do is to say, that's the problem, they're the problem, that's the subclass, those are the ones you should focus on. But we're primed for that manipulation.
So then that is why the concept of oneness is so difficult for people to grab onto. Though you and I are one, we are all connected to a higher being of source, and that we're all at the end of the day connected in a way that nature's connected. Nature is a perfect example of oneness. They all work together to create an ecosystem that is balanced. There is, there is competition with trees for water and resources and things like that, but there is cooperation as well. But this concept of oneness is what great philosophies and great spiritual, spiritual stories and spiritual traditions have been teaching. Even Jesus taught the concept of oneness, that everything I could do, you can do, and all these kind of things. Right. But at the time, everyone was like, pitchfork, pitchfork, pitchfork. So why is it, I mean, I think now more than ever that where the idea of oneness is starting to come up with these kind of conversations, and people are looking for these and listening for it. But what is it why do we need separation? What is it in our psyche or in our programming that is so easily to agree, like you and I are obviously different, but to believe that we're one, so much more difficult.
Yeah, we could unpack that. Like, what do we really mean by oneness?
Right.
Because we are, as you said, we are different.
Different expressions. Really different expressions. Yeah.
So right. We're different expressions of the same thing.
Right.
And you mentioned, another saying of Jesus, everything I can do, you can do.
And more. Right.
And more. But you can take that in two ways. Another way to take that is everything that you do, I could do too. And that is the core of non-judgment. To say, whatever I judge you for, whatever horrible thing that you've done, if I were in your shoes, could I be sure that I would not have done the same? Like look at whatever public figure you despise the most, and it's just shameful. How could he have done that? Like, I would never do that if I were him. Oh yeah, if you were subject to his entire childhood and his entire surroundings, can you really be so sure? Or are you just better? Just made of better stuff?
The ego thinks so.
So oneness says we're all made of the same stuff. We're all ultimately the same spirit made flesh. Mm-hmm. We're all emanations of the Creator. We are all, and in Buddhism, it's the concept of interbeing, mm-hmm. that I am like a holographic mirror of all that is. I am the totality of my relationships. I am life. Mm-hmm. Who are you? What are